brought to them, and they wanted somebody to plow the fields and run the Garden of Eden and whatever, So this is exactly what happened. And if you can change people, and you asked about how they built things, that is how they did an experiment. And the beings that we are, or as put before us as the Neanderthal individuals,
right?
These were the individuals who had all the brawn and not too much of the intelligence. And they were the workhorse group. They were all phased out, by the way. One of the great quandaries of paleoarchaeology is that they can't understand where these individuals just went. They know that the Neanderthal race just vanished. Well, of course, you turn them on, you turn them off, right? You get them to move the big stones, and you get them to build the calendars, the earth monuments, because, of course, you're lost. So you take some of your experts, and you build these precise monuments so you can do what? Study the heavens, study the rising and the setting of the moon and the sun and the planets, so that you can discover astrophysically where you are. This is what they did. They commissioned the building of the famous megalithic ruins that are scattered all over the world. That is the origin of Stonehenge. That is the origin of Karnak. That is the origin of the Bolivian, ruins. And all over Ireland, this is what I discovered in the field in Ireland, and I've surely believe that this was done on purpose. And the Nephilim, one of the translations for the word Nephilim is the Watchers. And the word watcher comes from the fact that they were sky watchers. They were watching the sky. They were making precise alignments because their agenda was to up and leave, and they needed to know where they were going.
So they didn't want to stay here forever?
No, they had no intention of staying here a very long time. They were ready to leave. They were just regrouping, and then they were ready to leave. But in the meantime, and of course this was over an extended period of time, and they may have wanted a colony here, they set about the genetic hybridization of the planet in order to have workers, in order to have a slave race. And the original, now this is where the story becomes very interesting, because the being that they created, this Homo Atlantis, he had all the intelligence that his, alien masters had, because he would have been scientifically and intellectually as advanced. But he had something that these individuals did not recognize. Because he had the human DNA, he had also the violet ray. He had the conscience, he had the connection to Mother Earth, and he had something that still, to this day, puzzles them. It's the alien part of us. It's the part, when they say you're cold-blooded or you have whatever, the propensity, and we even talk about people who are, serial killers, of having that incredible consciencelessness.
Yes.
That is what these guys are having, and they're looking at these individuals and not even recognizing these other traits that they thought were foibles. They thought this was unnecessary human emotions. But the Homo Atlantis being would not serve their masters. After a certain amount of time on Atlantis, they said, hey, wait a minute, what's going on here? Why are we having to serve these creatures? We don't even, like them. And to cut a long story short, the beings that they created, the Homo Atlanteans, they leave. They actually pack up and they have an exodus.
Where do they go?
They go to the continent of Oceania, better known to us as Lemuria.
Okay. And
they set up their own thriving high culture on Lemuria and became the opponents, basically, ideologically, of their Atlantean masters, their own fathers. Now, I'm not saying all of them left. I'm cutting I'm cutting this short. But they left and set up their own thriving culture on the continent of Lemuria.
Now, where is that?
That was in where we would call the Pacific Ocean is now.
And that's gone, too?
You bet it's gone.
Sounds like something sinister happened here.
Well, what happened, you were asking about that earlier on, you see, is that the original masters, now they got nobody to bring them their tea and coffee, and, nobody to change the channels for them, and whatever. They suddenly realized, we got to go back to the drawing boards, and they thought up, what was it that they had done wrong the first time? And they realized that the problem why these servants that they made wouldn't serve them is because they had the centers of higher intelligence. They were mathematicians. They were astronomers. They were computer experts. They were very highly advanced. So they decided that in their Mark II progeny, they would close down artificially. And you can do this in a laboratory with a couple of probes in somebody's head today. Imagine what you can do if you have the power of DNA.
But is that the reason for the Great Flood? Did they truly want to wipe us out?
No, the flood happened without... No, they had no intention of hurting anyone. It just, when they blew up the planet Tiamat, then Tiamat was mostly a watery or ocean planet. And the deluge was the pouring of the effluence through the space of the destruction of Tiamat. And the ancient records talk about this.
And it rained down on us.
It rained down on us. And as even your wonderful scholar here in recent times, I think a couple of decades ago, have you heard of Charles Fort?
Yes.
Well, Charles Fort was one of your finest researchers in this, and he went around even today, in today's world, proving that this effluence often, you see, when the asteroid belt comes close to the Roche field of the planet Earth, some of this effluence will still fall down, and people will be bemused at what is this. But when they went back to the drawing boards to do their Mark II being that we call Adamic, the Adamic man, which is also the Eves, was created, these masters decided that they were going to suppress the centers of higher intelligence, which is what they did. And they sent Adam and the Eves into the garden as the workforce. And that is where the euphemism that we use for that dumbing down is naked. It doesn't mean physically naked, it means intellectually naked. These individuals were sent into the garden with less intelligence so that they would be a more perfect servant.
That is fascinating.
It is fascinating. And it goes from there.
How did they push the button? Who pushed that nuclear button?
I'm coming to that. This is one of the most interesting things. Now, you see, imagine that you were, Homo Atlantis, and you were lapping it up over there in Lemuria, but you're intelligent, and you're keeping pretty much tabs on your Atlantean masters, because you know they're probably going to be up to something after you've left. And then the intelligent ones from Lemuria do, in fact, discover that their fathers have gone back to the drawing board to create a new, progeny, right? Mark II. And you realize what has been done, that they've had their centers of higher intelligence suppressed, turned off. Now you have a quandary, do you not? Because is it not a fact that Adamic man, dumb as he is he not your cousin? Because he has what you have, he has the human DNA, right? So to all intents and purposes, you and he share more in common than you do with the alien masters. So the Lemurians had a quandary. Do we allow our cousins to serve these masters that we have escaped from, or do we do something about it? Well, the ancient legends say they chose to do something about it. They sent their representatives into the garden to make contact with the dumbed-down Adams and Eves to say, hey, know ye not your gods, what we can do, you can do also and more, and if you come with us to where we are, we will,
Sounds like the serpent, right?
It's exactly what they were, because the term that I've been not talking about, that these individuals were also called, was the sons of the serpent. It doesn't mean they look like serpents. There's a reason in the book I explain where that whole thing comes from. But they say, and the ancient legends, and they all pretty much concur on this, that the Adams, they just couldn't get it. When these individuals from the sons of the serpent came into, the Garden of Eden, into the Atlantean compounds or anywhere else in the world to talk to these beings and try to wise them up a bit, the Adams just couldn't get it. But they say, the ancient records do say, that the Eves were very interested.
Mm-hmm.
For some reason, the
Eves were the smart ones.
They say, hey, who are these very comely, very magnetic individuals, And they were the ones who started to listen. And they were the ones who were more accessible to what the sons of the serpent were saying, and say, why don't you come with us to Atlantis? And in fact, in many of the talks that I give throughout the world on this, invariably, George, women come over to me in the end and they go, oh my God, you just told us the story of, the Eves and the Adams, why did we, the Eves, why did we bother taking these dumb Adams with us? Why didn't we just bugger off over to Atlantis with the sons of the serpent? I said, well, I don't have the answer to that one. But that's exactly what happened. It was the Eves that convinced the Adams, you see, to take of the fruit of the tree. Now, the fruit of the tree is yet another euphemism. The fruit of the tree of good and evil, or the tree of life, is nothing but an old, magical, Kabbalistic euphemism for the DNA, because that is always what, on through ages and ages and ages, the DNA was shown. It was shown like a tree with 22 branches.
Interesting interpretation.
Yes, it is. It's straight out of the canon of the Kabbalah, of ancient magic, the idea of a tree that has its, roots in the earth and has 22 pathways or branches and has the serpent coiling on it, and the fruit of the tree is the knowledge of good and evil, meaning the knowledge of the both sides. So they would be awakened into this by the sons of the serpent if they got to Lemuria. And since the spacecrafts were still working, they were transported through spacecraft, and the records are even so specific. They even mention our ancestors, these Adamic people, talking about leaving the earth and watching the earth go, below them, and it's all there for you.
So, but are you saying that Atlantis and Lemuria blew themselves up?
This is the next part, because when you can imagine that, now imagine, instead of imagining you're a Lemurian, imagine you're one of these Atlantean warlocks. Hey, things ain't been too great since you come here. You've been booted out of your own star system. You come to a planet you don't even like. You make a perfect servant to serve you, and then he doesn't serve you. He takes off and goes to another continent to live. Then you finally make the perfect servant, and he's seduced away. Right?
Yeah.
So 3 times you've been spited. It is that spite, it is that cuckolding that caused the ire, the wrath, the unspeakable wrath of the Atlantean warlocks on Atlantis, and the result of that wrath is what you've been asking. It was the unleashing of a global thermonuclear war on the Lemurians. Now, the Lemurians responded in kind, and this enormous war took place on our Earth, not more than 13,500 years ago. That's as recent as we're talking about.
And they did it in the form of what? Missiles?
Yep. All that the Mahabharata talks about. I have a statement here from the Celtic legends. Listen to this, George. It talks about, remember that god Lu I was telling you about?
I'll tell you what, hold that until the top of the hour, okay?
No problem.
Back in a moment. Also, we'll open up the phone lines. And welcome back to Coast. I'm George Norrie, Michael Tsarion, our guest. Michael, you're going to read a chapter right before the break.
Oh, yeah, a few lines. You were asking about, how the war was fought, and we were talking about the fact that they had super technologies there.
Mm-hmm.
We know that from Zechariah, but here we have in the Celtic legend something equally, if not more, fascinating. I was speaking about the great wars that the Gaelic people fought, and their sun god, he used to carry around a spear, so-called. Listen to the description of this spear.
Okay.
He also had a magic spear. There's that word magic again, right? If a machine works like so well, it appears to be like magic. So magic is just the ancient people, looking at machinery but thinking it was magic, because these aliens brought such sophisticated hardware with them that that's what it appeared. So they say he had a magic spear which he had no need to wield himself, for it was alive and thirsted for blood. When battle was near, it was drawn out. Then it roared and struggled against its thongs. Fire flashed from it. It tore through and through the ranks of the enemy, never tired of slaying. Now, what does that sound like?
It's a missile.
Exactly. Listen to this. Here's a chapter from the Mahabharata, just for anyone who hasn't already understood that all the ancient legends contain this information. The Mahabharata says, "It was as if the elements had been unleashed. The sun spun round, scorched by the incandescent heat of the weapon. The world reeled in fever. Elephants were set on fire. Horses and war chariots were burned up, and thousands of chariots were destroyed. The corpses of the fallen were mutilated by the terrible heat, so that they no longer looked like human beings. Never before have we seen such a ghastly weapon, and never before have we heard of such a weapon." There's another passage that says, "A single projectile, charged with all the power of the universe, an incandescent column of smoke and fire as bright as 10,000 suns. Hostile warriors fell to the earth like trees burned down in a raging fire." You see, all through the legends we have this. How come we haven't heard about this? When Oppenheimer, who's technically considered to be, the father of the atomic bomb.
Exactly.
Well, at Rochester University, no less, a student, an intelligent student, stood up and said, "Hey, Professor Oppenheimer, the detonation of your bomb at Alamogordo, was that the first nuclear explosion on our planet?" That's a very unusual question.
Of course.
But even more interesting is Dr. Oppenheimer's answer. He says, "Well, yes, in modern times, of course." And that is in the book, and all these quotes I'm reading.
He did not go on to elaborate?
He didn't go on to elaborate. Everybody would have just been shocked. You see, that's what we're talking about. Does somebody know something we don't know? Frederick Soddy, the creator of radium, one of the most important scientists. Herman Oberth, the father of rocketry. The list goes on of the individuals who spoke about this visitation that I'm talking about. I've got all of their statements in the book. One of the things that I do, we talked about this in the opening, is sources are very important to me. Because I know that I'm dealing with something that's quite controversial, that is very fringe, that obviously not a lot of people are going to buy into. It has been very important for me then to make sure that I go to the horse's mouth so everything is sourced. If people visit my website, taroscopes.com, look at the links page, go to the Atlantis page, read the book, you will find it is sourced not only with people that we know in the research community, a lot of your guests, the people from antiquity all the way down. The sources are there for people to go and study this themselves. It's very important, not to just take my word for it.
Did any of them, Michael, have a chance to escape the planet before this nuclear holocaust?
No. That was, of course, unprecipitated. I think it might have been because they were so